Denzel Washington entered the View set with calm presence, greeting the hosts with nods and measured smiles. He walked to his seat, folded his hands neatly before him, and seemed ready for a thoughtful conversation. That was the plan. But the morning's energy felt different. Ratings were sagging, chatter had spread backstage, and the producers had openly hinted that today might need more bite. Denzel felt it the moment he sat down. Whoopi Goldberg began, voice warm yet precise. She said, "Welcome back, Denzel Washington. With you here, we wanted to dig into faith, patriotism, and purpose." Denzel nodded and said softly, "That sounds good." Joy Behar chimed in, eyes bright. She said, "We were also hoping to talk about leadership in uncertain times. Because right now, America's craving clarity." Denzel replied, "Clarity comes from truth." The tone was still respectful. But Sunny Hostin looked up from her notes, her curiosity piqued. She said, "Denzel, you've spoken publicly about integrity and moral courage. Recently, though, you've been quieter about political issues, like the recent immigration debate at the border. Why not weigh in?" Denzel looked toward her and said, "Every issue matters, but not every issue demands a megaphone." Sunny said, "Some would argue that silence in a crisis is complicity." Denzel said, "Or maybe it's strategy." Sarah Haynes broke in gently. She said, "Strategy? Could you unpack that?" Denzel said, "There's a difference between speaking to be heard and speaking to make a difference." Sunny leaned forward, tone sharp. She said, "But if people feel unheard, strategic silence sounds like ignoring their pain." Denzel remained composed. He said calmly, "I'm not ignoring. I'm listening. And sometimes listening shows more integrity than talking." Sunny said firmly, "But here's the problem. Listening only matters if action follows." Denzel looked at her. He said quietly, "Then the question isn't silence. It's what comes after." The audience shifted. The energy was finally stirring. Joy said softly, "So what comes after? What should someone like you do when you see pain?" Denzel said, "Show up in ways that don't make headlines." Sunny asked, "You mean quietly donate, speak privately?" Denzel said, "Yes." Sunny challenged, "How is that better than standing on a stage and demanding systemic change?" Denzel paused. He said, "Because change happens when people believe it, not when they feel preached at." The hosts exchanged looks. That struck a chord. Whoopi said, "That's interesting." Denzel looked around and said, "When you scream at the world, sometimes the world screams back." Sunny's voice sharpened. She said, "But sometimes it needs to be screamed at before it hears." Denzel looked down. Then he looked up and said, "Or maybe it needs its hand held." The audience murmured. Sarah intervened. She said quietly, "We're getting to a crossroads here, I think." Sunny said, "A crossroads between performative outrage and real work." Denzel said softly, "And sometimes that crossroad comes with a price." Sunny asked, leaning in, "What price?" Denzel looked directly at her. He said, "Relevance, visibility, approval." The tension built. Denzel said every word carefully. Suddenly, the studio felt tense enough to snap. Whoopi tried to move forward. She said, "Let's." But Sunny interrupted firmly. She said, "So are you saying people like me are part of the problem?" Denzel held his gaze. He said, "If your role is to appear to solve problems rather than help solve problems, yes." Sunny's expression hardened. She said, "That's not fair." Denzel replied quietly, "No, it's honest." Heads turned, audience silent. The next moment would decide everything. Sunny Hostin held her ground. She said, "You think being visible, being loud, being clear is performance?" Denzel Washington answered without hesitation. He said, "I think if you forget who the spotlight is supposed to serve, then yes. It becomes performance." Joy Behar leaned forward and said, "But isn't visibility what moves people? What wakes them up?" Denzel looked toward her and said, "Or maybe it just makes them more tired, more divided, more overwhelmed." Sarah Haynes added, "But Denzel, you're a public figure. When you speak, people listen. Isn't silence?" Denzel cut in, not angrily, but firmly. He said, "I didn't say silent. I said strategic. There's a difference between being invisible and being intentional." Sunny's voice was low now, but it carried weight. She said, "You're saying my work is about attention, not impact." Denzel said, "I'm saying when impact is real, it doesn't need to announce itself." Sunny leaned back. She said, "That's easy to say when you're Denzel Washington. When your name opens doors." Denzel didn't flinch. He said, "Doors open, but they also close, especially when you refuse to follow the script." Joy said gently, "So what's the script you're refusing?" Denzel looked out at the audience. He said, "The one where black pain is a commodity, where outrage sells airtime, where solutions don't matter, only sides." Sunny's tone grew more brittle. She said, "So now it's about race?" Denzel looked back at her. He said, "It's always been about race, but not the way television tells it." The audience fell quiet. Whoopi said, "You've clearly thought a lot about this." Denzel said, "Because I've lived it." Sunny said, "So have I." Denzel nodded slowly. He said, "Then maybe we should stop using our pain to win arguments and start using it to heal something." The silence stretched. Even the camera crew had gone still. Sunny broke it. She said, "That sounds beautiful. But in practice, healing takes a side. It takes standing in the fire." Denzel stood up. He said, "Sometimes standing in the fire just means more people get burned." Sarah asked, "So what are you saying? That we do nothing?" Denzel said, "I'm saying that before you pick up a megaphone, ask who's going to be left deaf from the noise." Joy said, "You're walking away from the fight." Denzel looked at her and said, "No, I'm walking toward the work." He turned toward the hosts. Then he looked straight at Sunny Hostin. He said, "But you should ask yourself what fight you're really in. Because if it's more about being right than being useful, maybe you're not helping." Sunny's mouth opened, but no words came. Denzel turned to the audience and said, "We've made pain a brand, outrage a business, and truth a casualty." He walked off the set, never raising his voice once. The audience was frozen. The hosts didn't speak. The cameras kept rolling. The show cut to commercial. It returned without Denzel. Sunny tried to explain, but the words rang hollow. Because something had shifted. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't cursed. But the weight of his calm had made the whole stage feel unsteady. Later that night, clips of the exchange exploded online. No hashtags, no dramatic edits. Just truth, quiet and piercing. One tweet read, "Denzel didn't walk off because he lost. He walked off because the room stopped listening." The air in the studio remained thick long after Denzel Washington left. The hosts sat in stunned silence, the bright lights feeling suddenly harsh. It wasn't just a walk-off, it was a statement. Across the country, social media ignited. Clips of Denzel's calm departure were shared with one line echoing over and over. "He walked off because the room stopped listening." Some praised the moment. One tweet read, "Silence can be louder than shouting." Others criticized it. Commentators said he disrespected the platform. But most couldn't stop watching. By morning, mainstream outlets had picked it up. The headline was universal. Denzel Washington walks off The View and smashes the script. Sunny Hostin released a statement. "I respect Mr. Washington's choice. We had a profound disagreement, and he chose to leave. I hope the conversation he wants continues. Everywhere but this table." Whoopi Goldberg later told a daytime radio show, "Denzel brought us face to face with something bigger. Not anger, not conflict, just a mirror. And sometimes mirrors hurt." Denzel remained silent. No pundit appearances. No Instagram post. Instead, he visited a youth center in Los Angeles. He spent hours talking without cameras, listening, encouraging. Minutes from his visit leaked. A child asked him why he left the show. He answered quietly, "I left because truth doesn't belong to any one stage. It belongs to every conversation we refuse to have." The clip struck a chord. Authenticity mattered more than any soundbite. Politicians weighed in. A senator tweeted, "We're too busy amplifying voices that shout, not ones that strengthen." A congressman said Denzel reminded Americans that power sometimes looks like walking away. The View saw its ratings spike, for all the wrong reasons. Overnight, the network announced a reset edition of the show. The planned episode would feature clips, but not the moment Denzel left. They teased a reunion discussion, with no guests yet confirmed. Meanwhile, calls for the Denzel doctrine began circulating, a movement encouraging people to step away when rhetoric replaces reason, when platforms demand performance over purpose. 2 weeks later, Denzel Washington stepped onto the stage of a college auditorium. No set lights, no director, just a chair, a microphone, and students watching. He said, Sometimes walking away is walking toward accountability, to hear something real, to give yourself permission to change your own mind. Because if we never step off the stage, we never learn how to rebuild the room. The crowd listened. They didn't cheer. They thought. That moment, quiet and unscripted, echoed louder than any TV segment. It proved that even in a world obsessed with attention, truth isn't always a spotlight. It's a whisper that refuses to be ignored. This is Soulful Stories. If you've ever felt drained by noise, tired of performance, and longing for conversations that matter, welcome to your space. Subscribe, because when the room stops listening, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away and still be heard. Because in truth's silence, real change begins.